10 NBA players that forced rule changes, part 2. Part 1 was made way back in 2019, and in it we mentioned Derek Harper and hand checking, MJ and zoning rules, Shaq and zone defenses, Daryl Dawkins with broken backboards, Dwayne Wade jumping into players, Reggie Miller kicking his legs out, Kevin Durant and the rip-through rule, Derrick Rose and the Derrick Rose rule, KD and supermax contracts, Zaza Pachulia giving players room to land, Wilt Chamberlain with free throw rules, offensive goaltending, and widening the lane, and Allen Iverson and the NBA dress code. So if you're interested in any of that, go check that video out, links in the description. So obviously none of those will be brought up in today's video, but I will also be making another part to this video, so technically it'd be a part 3, which is either coming very soon or already in the description by the time you're watching this one, so go check for it after this video. For now though, here's these 10 players who forced rule changes in the NBA. The first one was made after Allen Iverson, and it wasn't technically a new rule, but ever since AI came into the league, he was known for his crossover being his signature move. But very early on as a rookie, once players, the media, and referees started noticing that AI was palming the basketball on every crossover he did, which is getting your hand underneath the ball on a live dribble, the NBA made sure to crack down more on carrying violations across the league, but more specifically just on Iverson.
You can't make that move and not carry the ball.
Truly one of the up-and-coming stars that's going to represent the league. They're going to let him get away with it more times than not.
But even that didn't stop him from dominating the league and still being known for crossing players over for the rest of his career. Bruce Bowen was an elite on-ball defender for the Spurs and made the all-defensive first team 5 times. He was one of the best on-ball defenders we've ever seen, but that's usually foreshadowed by his dirty play. Opponents would hate to go up against him because of it, and due to the fact that he would purposefully step right under a player when they went up for a jump shot to try and injure them, or at least put that in their head as a possibility when they came back down. Well, in 2006, after exactly that happened to Steve Francis and he sprained his ankle on Bowen's foot, the league made a rule saying that players must have a safe place to land when going up for a shot, and if not, a foul would be called. Of course, when Zaza Pachulia did the same thing to Kawhi Leonard in the playoffs, the rule escalated even further and became a potential flagrant foul if that happened. But we mentioned that Zaza part in the last video. What we didn't mention though was the actual Zaza rule, which the NBA was forced to put into effect, a rule that fan votes didn't solely decide who would make the All-Star teams anymore. Now they counted player and media votes into the selection process too. Due to the fact that in 2017 when the first fan votes came back, Zaza was on pace to be an All-Star starter that year, even though he was averaging 6 points a game off the bench. And you just know if they didn't do something about it, things would have gotten so out of hand and we'd be seeing the wildest All-Stars ever. So the fans really forced the NBA into this one. Back in 2010, Caron Butler caused the NBA to alter their rulebook when they banned him and all other players from being allowed to chew on straws on the sideline, saying that it was a safety issue. Caron had been chewing straws on the bench all 8 years he had been in the NBA, then he gets traded to the Dallas Mavericks, and 2 games later the rules changed. Nobody knows why the league just noticed it 540 games into his career, but it was said that he chewed up to 12 straws a game. Like, what are you doing? But it was something he started as a teenager to calm himself down, and it just became a part of his routine. So the league wasn't necessarily worried for him and his safety, but they didn't want kids at home to see him doing it, try to copy him, and then they choke and cause an issue. We've all heard of the hack-a-shack rule, a tactic used by opposing teams to foul superstars that couldn't shoot free throws to try and slow them down. Originally, the rule came into play against Wilt Chamberlain, who was a career 51% free throw shooter, and it led to a lot of games where the other team would just be playing tag with Wilt all game. He'd try to run away and hide behind other players chasing him up and down the court. Well, eventually back then the league made a rule that you couldn't intentionally foul an off-ball player in the last 2 minutes of a game, or they'd be awarded 2 free throws and possession. The rule stood for 30 long years until Shaq came along, and it started to be a real problem because just 3 hack-a-shack fouls adds 11 minutes to a game. It just wasn't fun to watch, and they talked about it for years but never made any other changes to the rule, stating that it wasn't always an effective strategy, seeing that Shaq's team still won a good amount of games where this took place. But Greg Popovich was able to find the best way to use this, and anytime the other team had the ball to close out a quarter, he would intentionally foul Shaq so they could get it back for the last possession, which is why the rule now states that an off-ball player can't be intentionally fouled in the last 2 minutes of any quarter. And that change was made in 2016. Don't know why it took him so long, but it was a little too late for Shaq. His close friend Charles Barkley caused a rule change of his own back in 1999, which says that a player isn't allowed to back someone down with their back to the basket for more than 5 seconds. This is because Barkley used to start at the free throw line, even sometimes closer to the 3-point line. He would just turn around, back guys down, and back into them for 5 to 10 seconds every single possession until he found himself right under the hoop, right where he needed to be. So obviously when this kept happening over and over, the league had to do something about it, and that's why the 5-second rule exists today. It really just slowed the game down and made it pretty boring to watch. When the rule went into effect though, it didn't really alter Chuck's game at all. It was just one small move that he couldn't do anymore. The Derek Fisher rule is really interesting though, because I didn't even know about this one. Because apparently after Derek Fisher hit that series-winning jump shot against the Spurs in 2004 with 0.4 seconds on the clock, a rule came out that said no regular basketball shot can be taken with 0.4 seconds left on the clock. If the ball is put into play with that much time left, the shot must be a tip-in. And the Derek Fisher part of this was actually an amendment to the original rule, which is known as the Trent Tucker Joker rule. Because back in 1990 against the Bulls, you can see there's 0.1 seconds left on the clock. Trent comes off the screen and hits a 3 to win the game. And this was very clearly a timekeeper mistake. You can see the ball still in the air here and the clock hasn't even started yet. So the rule was made to be at 0.3 seconds, it has to be a tip-in. But after Fisher's shot, there was still a delay on the clock. It was changed slightly to 0.4 seconds to prevent the game from being decided due to timekeepers not being able to be fast enough. Well, George also forced the NBA to change the rules up a bit. After years of players crashing into cameramen and stepping on them throughout the game, or after shots, they finally did something. Most notable when Dennis Rodman came down from a rebound, fell out of bounds, then over a cameraman's leg, so he kicked him where it hurt. And the cameraman flopped, got carried out on a stretcher, and got a $200,000 settlement. But that's where this rule starts. It wasn't until 17 years later where a change was actually made. And over the years, the sidelines just kept getting more and more filled up with videographers. But then Paul George is playing overseas, it's against the bottom of the hoop, breaks his leg, and 3 weeks later, a rules created in the sidelines are cleared out to prevent anything like that from ever happening again. The league said they were already talking about making a rule change like that for years, even before the PG injury, but obviously those were just talks. They didn't and probably wouldn't have made that rule if PG never gets injured. Matthew Dellavedova wasn't the direct reason this next NBA rule was created, because apparently it already existed, but he's become the most notable in the face of this one. It says players can't wear wearable technology like health trackers during games. And I mean, this one should have been obvious, but Dellavedova tried getting away with it and did for 15 games in 2016. He wore his black watch that tracks everything. It's like a Fitbit but for rich people. Even LeBron wore one in practice that year. Obviously this is a rule that hasn't even been needed until the past 10 or so years, and I guess it was just one that was created quietly behind the scenes along the lines of the NBA dress code. But it should also be obvious why this isn't allowed in actual games. The most recent player to force the NBA into making a rule change was James Harden for this past season. This one was long overdue and it was abused by a ton of players, but James was the biggest offender and had been doing it the longest, which was initiating contact with a defender, usually flopping afterwards and getting them called for a foul. This usually goes along the lines of jumping into a player on a jump shot, kicking legs out on a 3, wrapping up their arm when driving to the basket, or just stopping randomly to make the defense run into them. This one was big and we saw the impact of it right as the season began, and guys like Damian Lillard, Trae Young, Luka, Bradley Beal, and Harden's points per game and free throw attempts suffered because of it. Most of them ended up recovering by the end of the season, but there was also just something satisfying about seeing a rule change be made and then the immediate effect showing itself by the league's biggest offenders. And while we're here, I'm pretty excited about the new NBA rule that's going to go into effect next season that should eliminate the take foul, where when a fast break starts, the other team just fouls whoever has the ball to stop the fast break. Currently, the clear path foul only eliminates this if the player with the ball is in the front of the fast break, but this new rule should eliminate the whole thing, which means more fast breaks, more dunks, and it'll add a little bit more excitement to the game. No player directly made this one come to be, but it's still a good new rule in my opinion. We have part 2 or part 3 to this video coming very soon. Keep a lookout for it, or the link may already be down in the description, so go check that out. Like and subscribe so you don't miss it or any future uploads, and I'll catch you next time.